By the way, on the topic though of like off-season moves and like bringing in rookies and stuff, this is also the reason, in my opinion, that T1 has looked a little bit silly this split, is because it's all well and good if they could have fallen back on the angle of like, well, we're using a lot of rookies. It's like, so's DRX and no one even fucking knew these guys. Like, at least some of your rookies were like touted, like people knew Gumayusi's coming. Like, nobody knew. Like, these guys from the DRX Academy, dude, if you told me that Chovy and Deft leave that team, they don't have a coach anymore, like, I'm going to go ahead and say, well, that's not a playoff team. It's probably going to be bottom of the fucking whole LCK, probably maybe even be terrible, and that might just be the end of that project. Maybe it just spirals out and becomes like the worst. They're playing so above beyond the level I would have possibly thought imaginable without bringing in big names. It's unbelievable. Like, give me some thoughts, Wolf. What do you think of DRX? Because I actually, like I said, I had no expectations for this team at all.
I mean, I had no expectations either. They were definitely like towards the bottom of my power rankings. Like, I even had like in my brain, I was like, okay, Sandbox is going to be way better than this team. You know, like that's where I had them in my mind. And then we saw Kespa Cup and it looked pretty weak. Like, it was not great. It was not terrible, but I was like, well, I mean, this is about what we expected, right? There's a lot of room to grow. We'll see what happens. Then we go in and it's like, okay, Pioshik is the one you expect to crush and do extremely well. And he does well. He does fine. But like, the rest of the team kind of grew up around him, and Kingen suddenly became like the first player in Korea to be successful on Nara in this meta, and many players followed, of course. But like, Kingen was the first player where we were like, oh, I think he actually broke the losing streak. Like, it was like, oh, Nara is like 0-6, 0-7, and then Kingen actually has this fantastic game, is hitting stuns left and right, is entering team fights at like the right angle, and actually being extremely impactful. And until that moment, you know, Nara was looking terrible, and Kingen has been very good. Bao and Becca on the bottom side of the map have looked really versatile across a lot of different champions. I think Bao is super underrated as an AD carry right now in terms of how much damage he's putting off in team fights, his positioning. And this team is like filled with rookies and is a little bit odd, but like there were signs, right, of Kingen being good in the past. There were signs of Solka because he used to be quad. For those, you know, watching, remember that player, he was a substitute. Like, yes. there were signs that like, okay, this team has a lot of potential. But I don't think anyone was ready to believe them. And then the further issue is why people still don't believe them is they keep winning games they shouldn't, with drafts that don't make sense, or games where they're like 5,000 gold behind and they win like a few team fights at 37 minutes into the game and they just take a Baron and win the game, like I was saying before. So like on the eye test, I feel like they're better than expectations, but I still don't trust them. Like, I'm like, I don't know. Like, do I want to say this team is top 3? Like, this, even when they're in top 3 in the standings, like, I'm like, the standings say they're top 3, but I don't believe it. Like, I don't know if I trust that.
Yeah, like I said earlier, they're better at not losing than winning. I do think that again, that's a good thing to have, and you know, it's almost they have a bit of the luck. But, you know, luck is actually a very important thing to have. You know what I mean? Like,
of course, yeah.
They're like that. I think that they do have, you know, a respectable top jungle synergy. I think that they can move around the map. But, yeah, I mean, like, ultimately, all you can say is that this is above expectations for a rookie team to be that good and be that disciplined, really. Most rookie teams are not very disciplined, and they actually show that really well. So if they can continue to, you know, get more aggressive, you know, be more proactive on the map, find ways to, again, like I said, I don't think they know how to break like something what a team like Damwon does. But if they can continue to, you know, find new stuff about the game, they can be good for sure. This is certainly like, you know, a good result for the coaching staff, whoever is in charge of them right now, whether it's CV Max or behind the scenes or Edgar. It's Edgar, they right?
Song.
Yeah.
Oh, Song?
That's right.
Okay. But whoever's in charge of them is, I think he's doing a good job.
Sure.
This is certainly an excellent result for a 4 rookie team roster.
By the way, that if you ever needed proof of how different cultures are and how you can't just like copy and paste a coach from Korea, how about Song going to the LCS, being basically considered a joke for like 3 years? He was just literally coaching fucking CLG. Then when he comes back to Korea, he takes a bunch of rookies and he has them like top 3 in the fucking league. Like, that just shows you how like you can't just take people and just chuck them in another like, because what I always say in that scenario, Wolf, it's one reason why I found it so weird that Americans thought they could just hire like the Korean coaches. Like, He's not coaching Koreans though. Like this is, where's his strength going to apply? Like, listen, the game knowledge and stuff can all be great, but like interpersonal stuff is like part of what coaching is. Like I always found it so weird. They thought like a Korean coach would automatically be able to like train a foreigner, for example. Like to me, that's such a weird premise to even imagine would work.
Yeah, it is a weird thing. And like, even on the reverse side, like, I think generally speaking, when Yamato came over here and did coaching in Korea, like people respected his work ethic and what he did, but like I don't think we'll ever know. And I think probably Yamato would even say like he probably could have reached his full potential if everyone spoke fluent English, but they didn't, or if the culture was different, right? Like, yes. I mean, I think like the same rules apply both ways, and so it's really hard to see players reach their full potential when they travel overseas. And when coaches travel overseas, it's the same thing. And like, I mean, I come from an Overwatch background, right? And this happened so much, right? Where at the beginning of Overwatch League, it felt like most of the teams were like full Korean, but then it felt like, well, look at all these free agents. We could just get one, and then we'll just win, right? Because we have the best Genji player, or we have the best Brigitte player, or we have the best off tank. And it just never worked out. And then like everyone and all the analysts and all the fans were like, it's so weird because he was so good in Korea, but now it feels like he's just not as good anymore. I'm like, well, there are actually 5 other people on the team. It's not just him, right? Sure. And like there is a completely different coaching staff, and like a lot of Korean players get extremely frustrated. I know it's been discussed to death on a lot of your content as well, Thorin, but a lot of Korean players get frustrated when they go to the West because they're like, oh, well, these guys just don't practice as hard. This is so confusing to me. But the same thing could be said for coaches. When a coach goes over to the West, they're like, well, how do I convince these players they need to play way more hours because they don't want to listen to me because they think it's not important? There's so many cultural differences that go alongside that, and I know we're getting a little bit off track, but yeah, it's definitely something people need to think about more. And it's appalling that like this still continues to happen today. Like this has been happening for 10 years, and it still continues to happen today.
The NA culture thing is a tough nut to crack. Even like we have such a good crop of imports in NA, and all of them are like, Jesus, what is going on here? Even people like Alfari and Perks are like,
Sure.